Welcome everyone to our last meeting of 2022 on this 5th of December. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on physically, which is the Awabakal people. And I pay my respects to both their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I also pay my respects to the people, Aboriginal peoples of the land that you're all zooming in to us from wherever you are. And pay my respects to those elders, past, present, and emerging as well. Welcome to another physical versus digital meeting or gathering or showcase. We've got a couple of guests. Because people have to move, we're hoping to do the annual report for now, and then we'll move over to our guests in the second half. So Anne, would you like to please let people know about Zoom etiquette?
Yes, certainly. So if I can just remind people to put themselves on mute, particularly while the presentations are on. And then if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat or put your hand up, use that little reactions button if you'd like to ask a question. And I'll record the meeting and have it available online. But if there's any part of the meeting anyone like edited, yeah, just please let me know.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
The 100 Living Histories on it?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, here we are in 2022. The Hunter Living Histories is one of the university's most enduring and ongoing tangible links with its regional communities and cultural memory. It was founded in 2003 as the Coal River Working Party at the request of Mr. Doug Lithgow, president of Parks and Playgrounds Movement, who's here today. It was charged under the leadership of Dr. now Professor Eric Eklund to create an academic research group to investigate the early history of Newcastle with a view to safeguarding the heritage fabric of Newcastle's birthplace, which was the Coal River Heritage Precinct at Newcastle's East End. Soon after its formation, they were very successful at having the Coal River Precinct listed on the State Heritage Register. But when it came time for national listing, submission after submission failed to convince federal authorities. It soon became apparent through the work of professors of history Nancy Cushing and Eric Eklund and Dr. David Roberts that Newcastle and its history had been completely eradicated from the wider narrative of Australia history. With Nancy basically giving us the example of 40 texts that bared no mention to Newcastle or the region in the history of Australia. So the university and its academic, business and community partners set about rectifying this terrible situation and ramped up our efforts to restore historic evidence of our region's stories back into the wider narrative. So with the help of our newly arrived conservator, this was back in 2008, and a team of staff and dedicated volunteers to help, we began flooding the net with the most beautiful, crystal clear and large glass negative images from the Ralph Snowball archive donated by the Norm Barney family. So for this year, how accessible is our region's digital history? Well, here are the stats. As at the 30th of the 11th, 2022, our Hunter Living Histories data platform has had 7.3 million views. Our Special Collections Flickr site, which is basically, has gone into recess, but still people access it, has had 63.9 million views over its lifetime. Our Special Collections YouTube, which is hosting our all our digitized 16mm film, videotape, and is a process that Anne and the GlamX lab are basically just populating with MBN video footage as well across 50 years. 9.1 thousand views with 180 new subscribers for 2022. Over its lifetime, it's had 514.8 thousand views since 2008, with over 30,000 hours watched. The Hunter Living Histories blog has had 125,000, about 126,000 views for 2022, and we've published over 60 posts this year alone. So it's important to bear in mind that up until 2008, the digital images shared by cultural institutions across the country were tiny, in the hope that people would purchase higher resolution images. Unfortunately, this cost prohibited and locked out many people from disadvantaged areas, including our own local region, from accessing their own histories up close and personal. This came to an end with our digital program that has seen hundreds of thousands of digital objects together with their intrinsic contexts made accessible globally. So what has been shared this year during 2022? Well, we have the Fringe Histories series that Anne's been organising, inviting students, alumni and academics to contribute stories to the Hunter Living Histories blog on 10 themes, reflecting diversity, marginalised communities and lost histories, okay, using special collections resources. So the theme and contributions have involved women's histories, LGBTIQ, migrant histories with the Chinese Presbyterian Church, medical histories with Margaret Henry, and the social history of medicine in Newcastle, environmental histories with the Don Morris Walk, NAIDOC Week with the rare Aboriginal flag footage from 1981 that's still causing issues in terms of dating and who was there, from analog to digital, the History Week theme that we presented on hands-on audiovisual formats, mental health history. With relation to archives, the papers of Alison Douglas Adam of the Newcastle Naval Brigade and writer of the Australian Naval Reserve that were donated by Dr. David Dial went up online. I've got to put the link in after this meeting is compiled. The Merv and Janet Copley slides recently donated. There's the link in the Living Histories node. Eliza Nolan's original handwritten diary and correspondence from the first period of farming settlement outside the infant colony of Sydney Town at Patterson's Plains went up. The Maitland 16mm films involving some of the colour footage from the floods, which was pretty rare, but it also contains public marches and spectacles that, were on, and also family films. So they all went up as well. Dr. Ben Champion's Histories of the Newcastle Hospital from 1815 to 1915. And because we lost Queen Elizabeth, we had 4 of her visits that we went looking through footage and archival records that had been donated to us by the Newcastle and Hunter District Historical Society. Newly acquired engravings, maps and plans, you can see them all there. Some have hit the news because of their beauty and extraordinary detail. The plan of the Port of Newcastle from 1882 was hand-coloured Nags map. Newcastle in 1889, beautiful panorama, which we thought was taken from the air, but very cleverly done from the ground. The Australian Commonwealth and World from 1925. A knowledge of the world is the foundation of an education, and education is the foundation of success. Maitland in 1829. The BHP Steelworks site in 1911, the deepening of the Hunter River in 1857, and the report on the entrance to the Macleay River in 1890, with more to come. There's about 40 plus items that were acquired this year that we're yet to go through. Beautiful coloured engravings. So just stay tuned for them as they start to populate the digital environment as they make their way through our acquisitions department. Historical background with the Fortress Newcastle collection, the lives and language work of Biraban and Threlkeld that gave me RSI in both arms, Miss Rita Light and the Light family, which honours one of our library's greatest benefactors, but also that Light family is also involved in the creation of the former Newcastle Council Chambers, that beautiful building, and Morris Light, and also her sister, Frida. Is it Frida? Hilda. Must read. The Hunter Valley Museum of Rural Life and the Tarlee Historic House site visit, and also academic work from Dr. Paula Kane Byrne, visiting scholar at the State Library in New South Wales, and the Don Morris Walker was mentioned before. So Newcastle and the Hunter region has played and continues to play an important role in our country's stories and cultural evolution. We safeguard, we preserve, we scrutinise and we communicate the evidence in ongoing relationships with the community. 19 years later, and thanks to a communication student audit, we are collaboratively now known as the Hunter Living Histories. Our scope takes in the whole region, providing a congress through our university can meet and work in collaboration with Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples, migrant peoples, including the individuals, families, organisations across labour, business, religion and political divides who have helped to create and shape the University of Newcastle and the world as we know it today. Together, we pick out what our communities and researchers need and bring our students into the networks to experience and build their skills working with the archive and historical materials across a myriad of formats with industry professionals and technologies that get it out to the public. As a recognised regional repository of museums of history in New South Wales, formerly New South Wales State Records and Archives, the tangible and intangible archival records of our region's ancestors and their achievements are safely in the University Library's custody. They make up a magnificent regional research archive and rare book collections that have been donated over time. In the words of the university's foundation archivist, interviewed in 1981, Newcastle University grew out of the community, and indeed, this is particularly true of the library in which the archives are housed. In the year 1943, for example, the trade unionists of Newcastle paid $1 from their pay packets to help finance the establishment of the University Library, which is the building in which the archives is housed. Now, since then, on the archival side, we have collected the records of a number of institutions which were closely involved with the establishment of the university. I suppose the two most significant were the university were the Newcastle Trades Hall and the Anglican Diocese of Newcastle. The spirit of a bob a week helped create the university before it was even a thing. The archives help provide the evidence of the stories of our region and the people's contribution to the world around them, and supports the actions that need to be done right now to create a better future for everyone and everything. We help ensure that our region has a memory backup, that its stories are out there and inspiring people everywhere. Now, another interesting story that we didn't know anything about was Dexter Daniels. This involves, again, the trade unions in Newcastle that helped this Aboriginal activist from Arnhem Land, who was basically campaigning for wage rights and turn that whole issue into a land rights issue. This is a photograph that was taken earlier this year because the school, Cooks Hill campus, is actually creating a possum skin rug in honour of this man. And the students are working with a possum skin maker, and this was the smoking ceremony that undertook. Now, this story was unknown until and the family of Dexter Daniels in Arnhem Land didn't even know it either. It was a chance discovery within the University of Newcastle's Copley archives, and they're all the links that you can make. But basically, this had national ramifications, which most people would see with that famous footage of former Prime Minister Gough Whitlam pouring the soil back into the hands of Lingiari, and as a symbolic act. So there was Newcastle's role there that no one knew about. So this is one of those great stories that just now has resonated into the community, is involving students and academics and the community itself and his family. Next week, we'll have the honour to go and witness one of his descendants getting an honorary doctorate, and she will wear that possum skin rug, okay, that possum skin cloak. More community endeavours, and this is one that really that happened this year, and I love it when people step up and finish the work of people that are no longer here. We saw it a number of years ago with the work of the late Greg Hees with his thesis that had never been completed. A number of academics got together to basically complete that thesis on behalf of him, and it meant a lot to his wife and family. So this was another case of something that had been uncovered originally by Russell Rigby, one of our members, who's been on the Hunter Living Histories since very early on, but he discovered a snowball panorama from 1906. And we sought to have another panorama done from the same location, which we identified as Lemnos Parade. And thanks to Robert Watson, he was able to pull together the want. I had a presentation to do in front of the Australian people who had won Australian awards, and I mentioned this story that we were looking for a roof or residents in Lemnos Parade who could lend us their roof to take a drone picture, and the whole audience started pointing to this lady up the front. And that was Irene Saltis, and eventually dobbed her in. And the result was that she had to go and they didn't like her roof. They wanted the roof across the road. So she then had to go and talk to the neighbours. And anyway, these are the results, these beautiful panoramas of the 1906 original that had been uncovered, and we're still finding bits and pieces to this panorama, and the 2022 drone photograph that was taken by photographer David Diem. So you can analyze that, and there's the annotated version, which was done by Robert. So thank you very much. All right, on that one. Local Aboriginal histories went national just this month, though the Lycett and Wallace movie was played on NITV, has now gone on to SBS On Demand. So a lot of people are starting to see it nationally that were not aware of its presence in any other form. There they are there. That's what it looks like on SBS On Demand. Sorry, just... All right, so that's all been part of the Stories of Our Town project, which came to an end this year with 17 films. The links to all of them, you can see them all free of charge on the YouTube channels. But for some reason, when it's on TV, everyone watches them on TV. So enjoy them as they start to come out. But again, they're two Newcastle and Hunter region based stories that have now gone into the national audience. The Fortress Newcastle films and exhibition also wrapped up. There's a photograph of them all celebrating on the William IV at the end of the project, which was the 25th of June. And then we come to the next gen. Okay, so this is Indigenous intern Frida McGrady, who worked on the Ella Wallumbilla exhibition, which was the Here, Look, Let's Go exhibition. This was Frida's response to that, which was a blog post that she prepared for the Hunter Living Histories. It was very much a decolonising exhibition where they got a right of reply to have a look at how Indigenous and Aboriginal people had been represented in the historical record. So that ran for a number of months. We also had a Vera Deakin intern, Emily Connell, who's been working on a number of projects, and she recently digitized about 500 of an estimated 3,000 slides from the Merv and Janet Copley collection. So there's the link for those. And she's been rehousing her papers, photographs from a Newcastle female radio pioneer. So hopefully we'll be getting some of that stuff online next year. Braden Maybury has put together our current exhibition, which is the Crafted exhibition, which if you're here today physically, you might want to have a look at. It's in our area just outside of Special Collections. So Braden, it's all based on the book's design of the arts and crafts movement. So quite beautiful. I've never seen installations like that before, so it's quite important. Next Gen Wool for All. Dr. Anne Hardy and the GlamX Lab have hosted a number of students this year. Oliver Salmon and the Sue Beastie Oral History, Women in Sport. You can have a closer look at all these, but it's had effects both for our students, our community, and our researchers. You can see the interview has gone up on YouTube, so you can hear it and see it. Isabel Whittle and the Accidental Nurse, Robin Gordon. She did an oral history on Robin Gordon with a lot of materials that have been digitised. There's the link to that post. Great background, and Robin's popularity in the community really caused that post to really skyrocket when it was first released. Susan Zaya and the Valleys People, which is a series of interviews from which I quoted our foundation archivist from, that were produced between 1980 and 1981. They've all been sort of, there's a beautiful site, give you quick access to all of that material that's sitting on our YouTube channel. And Kynan and the Big Picture Learning. Kynan is a student at Cooks Hill campus who's joined us in special collections during semester 2. So he's had a real interest in the classics and ancient history, and explored some of the rare books within our Godfrey Tanner collection, and gave us some interesting presentations on it, which he delivered to us as well as his fellow students at the school. Practicums, Sasha and the Glam Experience. This was Curtin University student Sasha spent 2 weeks at Cultural Collections as part of the Masters of Information Science practicum. She was able to experience glam sector skills and created a finding aid associated with South Asia, which was a gap identified by one of our teaching academics. Anne's also been working very closely with the Linnaeus Wizard, again within the confines of the university, but this thing is a powerful tool which enables our audiovisual footage to be more discoverable. So it's amazing with what it can track down in the NBN footage and search. So we'll be continuing to that. But it's unlocked so far 3,000 hours of our audiovisual content, with many, many, many thousands of hours to come. So that dates with footage from 1982 to the 1990s. We've had an international publication called within a book. The actual chapter was called Visualizing Deep Time History in Context Using Accessible and Emergent Technologies, the Glam Sector Experience. And it's published in a book called Visual Heritage, Digital Approaches in Heritage Science. So we're very proud about that. A lot of our work can't be done without the volunteers. It would just take us forever. So we thank all our dedicated student and community volunteers, including the NBN audiovisual guys, Philip, Mark, Terry, Robert, Michael, Mitchell, Angus, Sarah, Isabel, Lee, Greg, Anne, Lorraine, and Ken. And the projects include audiovisual digitisation, metadata, magnetic tape film, Hanon photo collection, and Linnaeus project. So thank you very much. They're the listing of our media stories and the big losses this year. And please send us any more that you may have. But Cynthia Hunter, who worked very closely with us at the dawn of the Coal River Working Party, Hunter Regional Historian, Dr. Jean Talbot, and Mr. Jack Risby, who was one of the interviewees in the Fortress Newcastle film and former manager of BHP Steelworks. That's it. That's my report. I commend it to the room. So thank you very much for all your help during the course of the year. I think it's fantastic, but it's an ongoing work. Next year will be the 20th year that we've been around, so we're hoping to invite Professors Eric Eklund and Professor Nancy Cushing and Professor John Fryer and Doug to all maybe have a panel, maybe even Peter Hovens, Head of Knowledge at the Australian Maritime Museum, to join in a discussion and decide what we want to do next for next year. So all right, Anne.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce the first of our guest speakers?
Sure. So our first presenters, they're going to talk about the Digital Archives project, the Broken Record. So that was a collaboration between the City of Newcastle, Digital Library, the University of Newcastle, special collections, we were fortunate to be able to collaborate. So I'll introduce you to Associate Professor Kerry Glastonbury. Kerry is well known to many of us. She's a creative writer, poet, and has had a deep interest in history of the region. And also Senior Lecturer Dr. Alexandra Lewis. So Alexandra has been with the University of Newcastle since 2019. She came from Aberdeen in Scotland, where she was Senior Lecturer in English and Creative Writing and Director of the Centre for the Novel and many other appointments. She's published widely on literature, psychology, medicine, 19th century fiction and contemporary literature. And also joining is Jodie Vile, who's a casual research assistant and PhD candidate with the School of Humanities, Creative Industries and Social Sciences. Again, well known to many of us as a former Will student at the library, collaborated with Special Collections to curate the Josiah Cocking photographic archive that was exhibited at What Space back in 2015, maybe 16. So can I welcome all of you, and this presentation is a bit of a hybrid, so a bit of an experiment. We've got Ali online, who's going to share her screen, and we've got Kerry and Jodie physically with us at the meeting. So look, I'll hand over to you all.
Thanks so much, Anne. Just checking you can all share see our PowerPoint there. It should be shared on the screen for you to see. Excellent. Good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you. It's such a pleasure to speak about this project in the context of Hunter Living Histories. We'd like to thank at the outset both Anne Hardy and Gianni De Gravio for their support of our project, including giving their time so generously to introduce us to some of the Copley Archive materials through their expert viewpoint. I'm Ali Lewis, and together with a big team of people, including my co-investigators, Kerry Glastonbury and Andrew Howells, our wonderful PhD student, Jodie Vile, and Helen English as the lead and inspiration on all creative ageing at the University of Newcastle, we've recently engaged in a memory and life writing project with the help of the wonderful staff also at the Newcastle Digital Library. So today I'd like to outline some components of our project and share a few images and pieces of footage from the workshops to give you a sense of how this took place in the space. You'll see some beautiful portraits and photos of memory objects made by our very talented photographers, Hannah Robinson and Melanie Muddle from And Then Photography. I'll be outlining some of the design principles of the Copley Bequest funding application that Kerry and I wrote together, which is really key as an interest in archives and voices spurred our thinking about, firstly, how to run these workshops, and secondly, how this will all fit together in a curated digital record to be displayed for generations of library visitors to interact with and enjoy. You can see in the background here the bright blue, green and purple of the digital story wall, and we plan to add to what is already an impressive display of local history by embedding some of the voices and stories, including podcast excerpts from our project. Andrew is our design whiz, and his technical expertise will ensure that the journey of our workshops comes to life as an immersive experience on this display. You can touch on different areas and icons to bring up photos and sound files. And if you haven't yet seen and engaged with this fantastic interactive digital map and story wall located at the Newcastle Digital Library, please do check it out. It's phenomenal. Unbroken Records was a program of 4 workshops, 2 podcast recording days and a survey and focus group designed for 12 participants aged 75 plus to creatively engage with new technologies, including 3D printing, in order to explore stories of self and place. Our project aims to empower participants as storytellers and digital producers, and for them to make a direct contribution to the digital archives, a legacy for future generations. We were also aware that people have been particularly affected by social restrictions and isolation during COVID-19, and we wanted to encourage social connectivity as well as self-discovery through the act of storying of one's own life and memories. I suggested the title Unbroken Records for this project because I'm fascinated by the notion of living and expanded archives and wanted us to extend the idea of an archive to encompass the immediacy of people's voices. claiming the space to speak about the minutiae of everyday experience, as well as the traditionally momentous events more likely to be officially recorded elsewhere. Local lives and individual experiences and reflections matter. The Merv and Janet Copley collection is held at the university, and the Copley Bequest funds staff and student engagement with this vast collection of over 800 boxes of diaries and newspaper clippings. It is very much a life-writing archive. Merv and Janet were enthusiastic amateur historians who put themselves into their record of local living history. Theirs is a sustained effort across decades and is very much a snapshot of daily life. The journal entries range from their championing of social justice and environmentalism, to having hamburgers for tea, to pasting in government reports and ticket stubs from theatre visits. Did I mention that there are 800 boxes? With the help of Paige and Amir, I see they're here today, thank you both, from Special Collections, we brought some of these materials to look at in 2 groups in our workshops, and you can see one of these smaller groups in action here. We wanted to challenge the limits of the archive, making it more of a two-way exchange, and to spark all kinds of fascinating questions about different kinds of material objects and collections, the interface between the visual, verbal, and the textual, the personal and political, and the question of ephemera and value. So, what should be kept? Who tells the story? And who decides? The Copley Archive puts front and centre regional pride, as well as the history of activism in Newcastle. In very self-consciously and deliberately creating their extensive archive, the Copleys appear to have been keenly aware of the silencing of voices in many conversations through the decades. Often they turn their spotlight on issues facing Indigenous communities, women, workers, and low socioeconomic groups. There were some compelling points of connection, such as a strong thread that emerged in our participants' storying about women's working and family lives. We gave our participants journals and prompts, or cards with invitations and writing exercises to consider, asking them to respond to questions and also to reflect on how this felt and whether there were any challenges along the way. We began with photographs of younger selves and a look at the history of various suburbs already embedded on the digital map. Participants were invited to write a letter to their younger self. What advice or guidance might you give your younger self? What do you wish you had done or known? These ideas were shared in small groups, with everyone having the chance to talk about the process. We then moved from photographs to memory objects. I opened the third workshop with a series of ideas that captivate me as a creative writer with interests in the history of literature, medicine, and psychology. There is a rich history of novelists like the great Thomas Hardy of the 19th century, talking about how objects not only provoke, but also take on or embody layers of memory. That uncanny feeling that articles in a rented home, for example, are saturated with the thoughts and glances of others. In this workshop, we again shared stories, this time as a bit of a dress rehearsal for the podcasting sessions to follow. We asked participants to respond to guided questions about origin, appearance, and memory. What is the origin of your memory object? Where did it come from? How did it come to be in your life? Can you please describe for a listener your memory object, its physical appearance, colour, shape, texture, size? What memories does it evoke for you when you see it or hold it? This is a sensory exercise that shows how, in addition to the printed word and the image, objects and spoken word can be important archival presences too, and certainly excellent prompts for memory and life story exercises. Once we got cooking with these conversations, we discovered that the sky, or pie, really is the limit. There were some amazing moments and exchanges along the way, too many to recount. A highlight for me was seeing Harry demonstrate his Morse code operator for a group of school children who happened to be in the library. They were enthralled, and Harry was the first to point out the links between Morse code and text speak. We could not have run this project without the support of Claire Presser and Christina Roberts of Newcastle City Libraries. Claire has moved to a new job in Melbourne, and this is a huge loss to the local community. Christina has been instrumental at every stage in recruitment of participants, facilitating our contact with library users, and in particular with people living just across the road from the digital library, running our focus group, and on hand every day to make the practicalities run smoothly. She also liaised with me to set up a memorandum of understanding between the library and the university, which I hope will enable student placements in future initiatives that involve creative ageing and memory. And I'd very much like to thank the stellar Victoria Baskin Coffee, who has coordinated all the sound recordings, an epic venture, Jodie Vile, who worked with Victor on the podcast series, and our brilliant volunteers Shannon Benton and Sally Hoyle, who did so much to spark discussion and create a welcoming environment for people to feel comfortable sharing their stories. We also had the pre-workshop assistance of Kaylee Brooker and of Melissa Carlson, who took on the task of university ethics approval. A huge thank you also to Helen for getting everything started and steering us through this process. People use the buzzword language of closing the loop, but my major question about all of this is not just the question of how can we ensure that the planned outcomes include everyone and feel like an appropriate celebration of the things we learnt about each other and about well-being during our workshops. It is also, and perhaps more importantly, the question, how does this feed into something larger or beyond? A loop that doesn't stop as it closes, but keeps on circling and also expanding, both widening and extending participation, so that instead of a one-off program, there are genuine continued engagements that take place with the podcast studio, for example, and with spaces for people to share their life stories. According to Harry's very promising reading of my palm, there's plenty of scope for us to continue these activities. I'd like to share with you now a short video made by Andrew that gives a flavour of our experience in digital storytelling. And I'll then hand across to Jodie, who will say a few words about the podcast series. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video. Over to you, Jodie, to talk us through a bit about the podcast series.
Yeah, do you want to? Yeah. Although she's still sharing, they're not going to see you. But you.
Oh, will they see me if I sit where you're sitting?
Yeah, actually, yeah, you can because if you face the screen will still be showing.
Hi everyone, can you see me?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Ali. That was wonderful. I guess I just wanted to briefly mention the podcast, as Ali did that lovely presentation before. We had the SoundCloud put together by Victoria Baskin. So the SoundCloud the link is on the bottom of the screen there, and there's a series of podcast episodes by the participants of the Unbroken Records project, and it was really an amazing experience to sit with. I had 4 of the participants in the interviews that I did. I think that we had a lot of different ways for people to engage with their memory objects and with this idea of digital storytelling. And it was really interesting to see the different ways people engaged with the digital technology. But I think overall, most of the people, all of the people that I was involved in the podcast with, really just naturally took to the storytelling, the oral storytelling, which you all as historians would know is such an important aspect of history. And they all were a little bit nervous to sit and in being with microphones and lots of digital equipment and things, but you know, after a couple of minutes, all that sort of blended into the background, and it was really just a conversation between 2 people. And mainly, I think my role was to listen to the stories that these people had to tell, and I think that's another lesson. I think all of the people, all of us who are involved in putting the project together, learned something from the process, and so it was an incredibly valuable thing to sit and realise the power of listening, of active listening to people and learning their amazing stories. And the SoundCloud is an example of the diversity of the participants, their life stories and their life histories. But they're all fascinating. So I would invite you to check that out whenever you get a chance. And thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you very much, Jodie and Ali. Now, any questions? Just jump in.
Yeah, I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of oral history, talking to elderly family members, and I just wondered, I realize this is looking at more community-based oral history, but do some of the techniques that you come up with through this process could be applied to, you know, family histories done by individuals?
Do you want to answer that, Jodie?
Jodie, do you want to leap in there?
Well, I think the important part is definitely understanding the value of those stories and the listening side of it and that aspect of it. And it's sometimes, I think, easier because we gave them the parameters of a memory object that they could carry. So, you know, if you kind of open it too much, I think it's too hard to find something that you can really engage with. But if you start at that point, then it can really go anywhere from there. So yeah, I think it's a really valuable lesson in finding the value in these really everyday objects, but they have so much more to tell. Yeah.
And that podcast studio is in the public library, so it's bookable. And also, once you get it online, it's shareable. So we're hoping our participants, obviously before Christmas this year, will send the link to their family. And it's quite like you said, it can be a metonym or a small kind of task that contains a whole lot more and just goes into depth on one thing and memory. And that that's probably less labour intensive than trying to tell a linear full family history, but can be just as potent through its limitations.
Wonderful. I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor Carol Duncan is joining us today. So thank you very much. And Carol, you mentioned in your note that you're training up some City of Newcastle staff in producing podcasts.
Yes. So I have an MOU with the City of Newcastle because I'm both a councillor and lost Newcastle, and, you know, sort of never the twain shall meet there. But I have an MOU with the organisation to train some of the new digital libraries people in using the podcast studio, which is fantastic. So I've had 2 come through so far, and they were both really, really wonderful and really competent. I'd recommend, there's probably a couple of other things for you and Anne to think about. I was able to drop in on one of the Unbroken Records sessions, and it was just phenomenal. It was so much fun. But I would suggest, as an outsider and also a professional media person, that the ease and degree of comfort, in fact, that some of the seniors had in doing this really surprised me. And I think that is simply because technology and new iPhones and so on, even the podcast equipment, is becoming so much more intuitive. And it was just a delight to drop in. I think it was the final session. It was really, really fabulous. I'm also coming back to the University of Newcastle first semester next year, teaching podcasting and radio. So I'd suggest that under the terms of that MOU, John, if you would like to have any of your, like a couple of your volunteers trained in the podcast studio, I'm sure that that's something that I could do for them to help equip you, because I also Lost Newcastle has the MOU with you to help through sales through Lost Newcastle, make donations back to the Vera Deakin Fund. So this year won't be a lot because I've only just started, but it's a little bit. It might help you get a few images digitized, but it would, I'm also really happy to use that facility under my other MOU. I've got MOUs everywhere. MOUs everywhere.
Memorandum of Understanding.
Yeah, if you've got a couple of people that you would like to have trained to use it, because as it was mentioned, it's a bookable space, then I'll happily do that.
Well, yeah, we can put this on the agenda. Like next year, we become 20 years old at this gathering. So every year we sort of throw it out to the community to see what they want to do that year. So, and that helps shape the kind of projects that we get involved with. But that would be great.
I haven't actually written yet my assessment pieces for next year. So if you've got something that needs to be done first semester that we can make a student assessment, let me know.
Yeah, well, you're a good in between the worlds person. So that's fantastic. So that's something for Paige and Anne to maybe organise with the volunteers. I know that there are projects going on that will have an oral history component, like one that's in the works at the moment with Margaret Senior, which definitely would be fantastic if we could get some help there. But anyway, thank you very much.
No worries. I'll drop off because I've got to head into another meeting, but I just wanted to join in and say hello and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And let's see how we can help you do even more next year.
Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Any further comments or questions for Kerry, Ali, or Jody on this project? Yes, Nancy, I can see your hand. Sorry if anyone else had a hand up before.
Hi, everybody. And I'm sorry Carol's disappeared so quickly because I wanted to say I'd love to do the podcasting training.
She's still there. She's still there.
I'm still there. Hi,
I'm here.
Carol.
I just hung on long enough to see if it was something you wanted to talk to me about. Nancy, give me a yell and we'll just book some studio time and show you how to do it. See,
sounds great.
It's easy peasy.
And beyond that, I really liked, Ali, in your talk, you were saying about how who decides what's important, who decides what should be recorded as oral history or in other forms of history. And I really liked the way that, by soliciting your participants to bring in a memory object, they were setting the agenda. They were, a lot of history projects, it would be, well, I'm looking at protests during the Vietnam War era. If you know about that, come and talk to me. And I would love to hear everything that you have to say about that, not so much the other stuff. And so it's a really nice way of returning the power in the relationship to the people who hold the memories. And I was also really impressed with, I mean, the two people that you profiled, like Marie Callahan. I was interested in how your participants became part of the project. Did you just put out a general call, or did you target certain people?
Well, Christina Roberts was really instrumental in facilitating our contact with people through the library. We had to follow our ethics guidelines, so we were able to contact library members, and in particular, a cohort of participants who live just across the road in the Long Tan building. So that was the way we did that with these sort of 12, initial cohort of 12 participants. But it's an interesting and an active question if work were to continue, if our podcasting ventures were to continue, because there was such a lot of interest in that from existing participants, and also their sense that, hey, we would know people who would be keen to get involved with this and using the space in this way. So recruitment is a key question, I think. And the footnote that I'd mentioned to that is also really one of the fundamental sort of points of the ethos of creative aging, is to really reach out to people who might not otherwise know about these opportunities or might not have, for whatever reason, the confidence to become involved with them. So then there's all sorts of other questions that are out with the scope of the project we had, but in terms of mobility, in terms of transport, in terms of all of those questions, and really reaching people who might not hear about this through the usual channels. You know, how would we reach folk who live near the digital library but don't know that it's there, for example? But I have to agree with what you say about the object as starting point and allowing the person's narrative rather than perhaps the expected narrative to emerge from that. One of the things we really learned, I think, was hopefully we started out not attempting to be too prescriptive, but we really learnt the value of asking open questions, allowing people to feel comfortable following their own thoughts and associations. And that was one thing actually with Marie and her memory object, a pair of earrings gifted by a workplace for long service. But then there was the story she had that she felt she was expected to tell. And then there was the deeper layer of storying that by the good fortune of all of the different personalities taking part, she felt comfortable in that space to actually realize, okay, there's no right answer here. This is my voice and my space.
Because she had, you know, such a public persona for a long time. Yeah, so I imagine you have to sort of get through the layers of that. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh, Howard. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I've got to sign off. I've got my appointment.
All right. See you.
Have a happy
I thought you had a
Christmas.
question. All right. Well, look, thank you very much, Ali and Jody and Kerry, if you're out there somewhere. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I think, it's very important these days, because my next door neighbour who passed away, was of that generation that got involved with everyone else's business and knew everything about everyone that lived in the street. You know, these days are a bit too polite to just inquire. I mean, it's perceived as being nosy, but you had a wealth of people that understood one another and understood their lives. And I was always told never to treat someone like an object. So, you know, it's very important to have the context around around these things. So they're not just objects, because you would not want to be treated like an object. So why would an object want to be treated like one? So anyway, but thank you very much. It's been a pleasure with being involved in this work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you, Johnny, and to Anne and Paige and Amira and the whole team that have helped us along the way. We really
it's a
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
We love seeing these sorts of things emerge out of there. All right, over to our next guest, who is Robert Fuller. Robert is a late returnee to academia after a 45-year break through his career, first in the military and then in industry. He was a tertiary educated as an anthropologist / archaeologist, and much later, after retiring, did a research Masters of Philosophy at the Macquarie University in Sydney on Indigenous astronomy. This is a fascinating topic. He's been publishing on the cultural astronomy of the Kamilaroi and the Yuali people of New South Wales, and has now completed a PhD at the School of Humanities and Languages at the University of New South Wales, researching the cultural astronomy and songlines of the saltwater Aboriginal peoples of the New South Wales coast under the supervision of Dwayne Hamaka from the University of Melbourne and Dan Robertson at the University of New South Wales. He has been active in outreach to the non-Indigenous community through lectures and non-academic articles, and was the instigator of the successful documentary on Yuali astronomy, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Star Stories of the Dreaming. What a wonderful topic. Anyway, he's now adjunct fellow at the School of Science, Western Sydney University, working with Dr. Ray Norris, astrophysicist and early Australian cultural astronomer. Bob's academic publishing, we've got the link to that, which we will share in the site. But over to you, Robert. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Johnny, and to Anne as well. And before I get started, I just want to say what a wonderful source of information the Honor Living Histories is for academics who are working in the field of Aboriginal knowledge and history. You know, we've been talking about sort of contemporary histories here, but there's also a very good resource in Honor Living Histories for people working with prehistory as well, because the fact of the matter is this prehistory in Australia is not written down. So where are people going to learn about that? They have to learn from the people who were here from Europe first, who spoke to Aboriginal people and wrote it down. And that's our real source of a lot of information, because so much culture has been lost over the years. As you can see, I've been working with people for the last 10 years, but because of COVID, I've had to sort of put that aside, because most Aboriginal communities were not really open to researchers coming in and talking to people. And our little group out of Western Sydney, which is basically astrophysicists who are actually cultural astronomers. I'm a bit of an outsider. I'm an anthropologist who became a cultural astronomer. During this period of COVID, we've been working a bit more with Aboriginal rock art, because it was something that we could do, and it was an area that needed a lot of work, to be quite honest. So one of the things that's come out of that is a small project we've been running on rock engravings in the northern Sydney Basin, which is really north of Sydney up to Newcastle. And what we're really concentrating on is trying to come up with a methodology for recording for future restoration. As some of you may know who've looked at Aboriginal engravings, a lot of it's becoming very faint, very difficult to see. And as I learned from probably one of the last great experts in Aboriginal rock engravings, Ian Sim, who recorded a very long interview with Honor Living Histories recently, and I've only just recently been able to watch. Ian has sort of given me a bit more belief now in that a lot of the rock engravings that we do see are relatively new within the last 1,000 years. And therefore, given the differences that we see from year to year in them, they're fading pretty quickly. So one of the things that's come out of this is this team that we put together to work on technologies on this. And at the moment, it's myself, Ray Norris, who's a radio astronomer, and some other students and personnel out of Western Sydney Uni, and a couple of independent researchers, Bob Pankhurst, who some of you may know from Somersby, who's a very well-known rock art researcher, Lee Button, who's from Lake Macquarie and also works with the Living History Unit here. And we're also been working with New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife and the Metro Land Council from Sydney as well. And the purpose is basically to, oops, go back one, to, as our remit is to further cultural astronomy in the Sydney Basin through rock art research. Now, that might sound a little bit strange, but we're finding that there are connections between rock art and cultural astronomy. As I think many people know, Aboriginal culture encompasses everything. The land, the sea, and the sky, it's all country. So something that's in the sky is connected to culture, and that culture could end up into rock art. And we're finding some examples of that. What we really want to do is to develop new techniques for recording and analyzing rock art. For actually the last 200 years, starting back in the late 1800s, rock art was recorded by people literally going out, walking around, finding the rock art and making drawings of it. And some of them are very, very good. Campbell, McCarthy, Sim, they all were very good at doing this. But it's becoming harder and harder as a lot of the rock art is becoming fainter. And we're trying to come up with new techniques. We're using this to provide a record of the current state of rock art. And the reason for that is that there is a lot of controversy within Aboriginal communities themselves about reconstruction or regrooving, which is often the term used, of rock art. So what we want to be able to do is at least give Aboriginal people the ability to reconstruct or regroove rock art in the future if they deem that's what they want to do with it. So we're giving them as close as we can the current state of the engravings. And we're also doing another project too, which is developing a master database for significant rock art. Knowledge and written knowledge about rock art, particularly in the Sydney Basin, is scattered over a number of different places. It's in the academic literature, it's in things like the AIMS, Aboriginal Information Heritage System, and it's also basically located in organizations like Hunter Living History and the other museums. There's also a lot of private databases of people who are interested in rock art. So we're trying to pull all this together into a master database, which can be used by researchers and communities, not a general public knowledge database, but to be used for people who actually have good reasons to look at it. Now, the techniques that we're looking at and that we're actually using, the first is using low-cost drone photogrammetry to record large sites. Photogrammetry, if you don't know, is a means of using many overlapping images, 2D images, to create 3D images of surfaces. And an example of this is something we did earlier this year, which is at the Elvina Trail Rock Platform in Ku-ring-gai National Park. Now, if you don't know this one, it's very close to the entrance heading towards the North Head. Heading towards West Head. And it also contains a very famous engraving of the celestial emu. This is a very large site. It's practically half a hectare. And if you look at the very far right over there, you can see the West Head Road there, and you can see a car line, so you can see just how large it is. So this was done with a drone in about 20 minutes, which is fairly amazing when you think about it. And the purpose of this is not only to record the site, and actually within the images, we can actually see most of the rock art So it's quite significant. Looking at a bit closer at an image, you can see that this particular platform is one of the very few in the Sydney Basin that has what's known as tessellated pavement, which is a fairly unique feature in sandstone platforms to Australia. And there's only 2 or 3 of them actually known in Australia. And these were caused by a form of cracking during the formation of the sandstone that creates these long parallel ridges in the sandstone, which are totally natural. However, if you look a bit closer, you'll see these small round circles. Now, these, after many years of controversy, have been come up with a name called cupules. And they're basically about 50 to 75 millimeters in diameter and about the same depth. And for many years, it was thought that these were natural. But after a lot of work, the archaeologists and the geologists have actually decided that these were man-made. And on this platform, we estimate there's somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 cupules. And these were all done by individuals with a hardened pointed stone creating a hollowed cupule. Now the question is why? Because there are other pavements in the Sydney Basin that do have these cupules, not many. And sometimes you'll find small scatters of cupules at different places. It was suggested very early by Hugh Cairns and I think it was Philip Brannigan, who's a geologist, that given the celestial emu on this site, that this could possibly be a star map, and these cupules were stars. And they tried quite a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, to try to work out if there was any star patterns in here. And they were able to find 3 or 4 cupules that made up a star pattern. But of course, if you look at the sky, you realize that you could find that almost anywhere. So what we're trying to do with this, besides recording this site, is we are recording at very high resolution, and I haven't gone to the fullest resolution, but this photogrammetry will give us less than centimeter resolution. We are in the process of trying to come up with a digital method of recognizing these cupules and creating a cupule map. And that map will then be used with a digital star navigation system called a star finder to actually work out if there's any stellar map in this rock platform. So that's the little project we're doing here. Of course, the rest of the platform, we're also recording the condition of the rock art as well. The other technique is what is more traditional ground photogrammetry, where you use a digital camera, digital SLR camera, and you use it fairly close to the rock art that you're trying to record, generally within the range of 1 meter to 3 meters. And with this type of photogrammetry, and this is an example of a vertical rock engraving, which they've done the photogrammetry over an area of about 2.5 meters square. And each of those little blue things is what they call a camera. That's the actual location where the image was taken from. This type of photogrammetry can give you a resolution of literally millimeters, 2 or 3 millimeters. And this is what we're using on the individual rock art to come up with a record that can be used in the future for possible restoration. Now, oh yes, I do have a mouse here. It's a little hard to see. I may be sitting too far away. Those of you on Zoom, probably better condition, but there's actually amongst a number of engravings in here, there's an anthropomorphic image here, a man, legs there, one arm pointing up that way, head here, the other arm pointing up that way. And that's an engraving up at Summersby. And, you know, it's still reasonably easy to see, but there's a bit more to that than what you just see there. And this is why this photogrammetry is so much more useful. Now, this is, you can, of course, zoom in using the photogrammetry, but what I've done here is what they call a hillshade, where we've actually taken the 3D image and created in just a monocolor so that you can actually see the image. And once again, here's the man here, this is his body, his left arm, head, right arm, body, legs down here. And if you can see it, there are some pits which have been engraved into the engravings, some at the tips of the fingers and the tips of the toes as well. And Bob Pankhurst, who's known about this particular engraving for many years, had a theory that this was actually engraving of the constellation Orion, which happens to rise in the northeast. And he actually went up there on in the evening to see that it actually rose from the direction that the man is pointing. And then later on, he realized that their arms might be pointing some way, and he thinks that this arm points at the summer solstice sunrise, and this one at the winter solstice sunrise. So we've recorded this in great detail, including the pits, and we're now I'm just in the very process of actually overlaying the Orion constellation over this to see how closely it fits, but it looks pretty good. And I think Bob's theory is pretty right. And we know that Orion was a significant figure in this. Just
I'm sorry, I just got on just wrong. It's so fascinating.
okay. It'll be recorded.
Yes, and I'll be sending you some pictures of rock art.
Oh, great. Look forward to that. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, so we know that Orion was significant to Aboriginal people, not only here in the Sydney Basin, but all across Australia, particularly because Orion fits in with the Seven Sisters dreaming story. But here also, it could be that Orion is related to one of the early cultural heroes as well. So this is the type of work that we're doing. With the imaging, and we have plans to do quite a bit more imaging around the region. With the database, as I said, we're basically trying to combine the existing databases of people like Ray and Bob Pankhurst and some of the national parks researchers with the Ames data and also with the documentation from McCarthy, Sims, and Campbell. These rock art sites in the database would have the confirmed locations. We'd have the imaging, of which there are many images. Where we have cultural commentary, we would try to put that. And we'd also try to link it to the traditional owners or registered owners of the sites. And as I said earlier, the database was not going to be public, but it'll be for accredited researchers and relevant Aboriginal community members. So that's a little project that's keeping us busy while we're getting back towards projects working with Aboriginal communities.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Robert? Ali and Amir. Over to you, Ali.
Oh, if that's me, that's just an applause. It's
Oh,
not,
okay.
not a
Sorry.
question. I'm just appreciating.
I need a stronger set of glasses.
Very, very informative presentation. Thank you.
Sorry. Amir, did you have a question or was that applause too?
my mother's partner is a local astronomer, and they've just opened a community telescope at the Rock, which is just outside Wagga, and are really connecting you with Indigenous.
One of my colleagues, Trevor Lehman,
Right.
is he's based out of Orange, working with the Rogers people.
Yeah.
And he's done extensive amount of work down at the Rock and
Okay,
to that
great.
area
Yeah.
with the astronomy of that area down there.
Right.
And it's fascinating. The Rock it's got so many astronomical connections. It's amazing.
So,
With Orion as well, by the way.
I'll pass this on to him basically, and hopefully he'll come up and check out the Summersby site as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
So contact me, would be
I
happy.
will. Yeah, great.
Mm. So, Robert, do you know of anyone else that's creating a database of these sites besides the various Aboriginal organisations that have an interest in them? But from a scientific point of view,
Outside the Sydney area, I'm not too sure. I'm sure there are people doing this, but to be honest, I mean, cultural astronomy in Australia is relatively new. Ray Norris pretty much started it about 15, 20 years ago, and there's probably about maybe 10 to 15 of us working in the field, either as full-time academics. Well, actually, there's only one full-time academic, and that's Dwayne Homaker. And the rest of us are sort of part-times or retirees or whatever else. So, yeah, I mean, national parks have tried, but they have some resource issues. Local land councils have tried, but they have the same problems as well. And what we're trying to do is just try to pick up all the little loose ends and bring them together, because there have been times when there have been people like McCarthy who've done some significant work that needs to be connected to all the newer information we have.
yeah, because even with regards to that Orion engraving, there are other Orion engravings you can compare at other sites. So interesting to see what could come.
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of any other, but there probably are. There's so much that it's interpretation is, as you can imagine, almost impossible in some cases. We spend an awful lot of time doing what ifs. And the problem is there's no traditional owner who knows that site who can come along and say yes or no, or it's none of your business. So it's a lot of time it's a speculation, and speculation is sometimes not the best way to deal with this type of information. Better just to recover it and make it available for whoever's business it is in the future.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Robert. That's fascinating. Okay. Now, since it's our last meeting for the year, I just would like to ask any of the representatives from the various groups if there are any updates they wish to share before we say goodbye for the year.
I know representatives from the National Trust about an apology, so they're not here. They usually
Michelle has a hand up.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Is that you, Michelle Watson?
Yes, it is me.
Okay.
In my capacity as research officer for the Stockton Historical Society. So we've had a big year. We just wanted to give everyone a bit of a rundown of what we've been doing. So in March, we had a pop-up exhibition to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the opening of the Stockton Soldiers Memorial, which has a really interesting history. Culminating in April and May, we took part in the Fortress Newcastle project and the exhibition that was held as a society, with a shout out particularly to Cheryl Ann Bailey and to Mark Rigby, who worked really strongly on that project. We also, in the end of October, launched 4 new historical interpretive signs as part of the Mitchell Street upgrade that was put in place by Newcastle Council. So that was done with the support of the Port of Newcastle, who paid for the fabrication of the signs, and the City of Newcastle, who were kind enough to cover the installation of the signs in the new gardens for us. They've proved very popular. We've got a lot of positive feedback from the community about that project. The biggest project we did was on the 27th of November. We launched Volume 4 of Stockton Over the Years. It's the first volume in that series, new volume in that series in over 20 years. And again, we've had a really, really positive feedback from the community. And we've sold many, many copies of that book so far, but we've still got plenty left if anyone's interested. And from a more technical perspective, with the support of some grants from various government organisations, we've been able to archivally rehome all of our archival holdings, and they've also been described and digitised down to item level. So we've currently got 20 of our 22 collections have been completed, and we will be getting the last 2 finished by the beginning of 2023. And we're hoping to then make all of that available via an online portal, which will be a project that we'll be undertaking in 2023. So we've had a very big year, but we've had some very positive support from the community as a result of that.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Mark showed us the new book. It's fantastic. The landscape orientation is really, really good for the photographs.
Yes, yeah, I mean.
Hi, Michelle.
Michelle Carey.
Can you hear me?
Just going to ask questions.
Can you
Yes,
hear?
I can hear.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to be doing our Stockton Memorials Walk for the Writers' Festival next year that was cancelled last year. And we're all blow-ins, we're definitely coming fresh to the site. But I think we've got Irene Butterworth, for an ex-president, to come along and talk. So that'll add some depth. And I was wondering, seeing it's a Writers' Festival, if we might be able to get hold of the book to sell at the bookshop during the festival, if you're interested. So I might get in touch after this meeting.
Yeah, well, we definitely love that opportunity. Yeah, for sure. All of our info is up on our website and our Facebook group, so we're pretty easy to get hold of.
Okay, fantastic.
If you drop us an email, we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful, thank you, Michelle. Any other updates from any of the groups? Yes, John.
Yes, I had a moment's difficulty unmuting. Just to report that you may remember, everybody, some time back, early in this year, there was a man called Warwick Schofield from Tamworth Way. He's keen on astronomy too, but that's just passing. And he's very keen on trying to prove where Charles Sturt had his underground room just out of Tibooburra, where he summered over for 6 months while some of his crew were very sick and eventually died. And to try and, he thinks he's found the location and would like to prove it. And I can't believe that Charles Sturt, a very good surveyor, spent 6 months without reading angles and doing things out there in a surveying sense. And that would help positively identify the site. The problem is nobody can find any Charles Sturt field notes or surveying observations. So I just throw it out there. I know it's on our website, but if anybody's got any bright ideas, because I've now got some people who are prepared to go out and do the surveying and locate the spot, but they haven't got any data to work with. So I just wonder if Anne the other day was looking, there's some thought that these records would have gone to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, and Anne was going to have a look at that. I don't know how that all went, but I just throw it out there if anybody's got any bright ideas where Charles Sturt's field books might be.
I'm going to try to spend some time through the break, John. I think it's going to be one of those tasks that I'll go down many rabbit holes.
I think a lot of people have fallen down those holes. You might find Alice in Wonderland while you're there.
All right, so that's on the task list for next year. All right. Well, look, I think if no one has any further updates, I would just like to say thank you very much for being part of this gathering during the course of the year, being part of our showcases, to all the presenters that we've had and the students that we've had working on these various projects. It's a very satisfying thing to see unfold. And sometimes these projects take years to come to fruition, but it's been a great pleasure. So over the break, have a talk to your various people out there and in various groups, and just see what they're interested in pursuing next year, whether it might be a commemoration or some burning question that needs dealing with. And we'll try and frame some, project work around them. If it involves, you just want to see more digital images, or you want to see more glass negatives, let us know what the burning desire is, and we'll try and fold it into something that we can achieve. All right, so have a wonderful break, and we'll see you next year when we turn 20 in February of 2023. So adios.
Thanks. Bye. Very good.